So hello everyone, a very warm good morning to all of you, although it's a winter morning. We are just waiting for Dr. VK Singh to log in. In the meantime, we have a very amazing panel today. I think some of the eminent thought leaders representing industry, I would say government and, international viewpoint as well. So it would be really good if you start typing your questions maybe in the chat. And when it comes to the actual panel discussion, we may utilize some of your questions you know during the panel discussion. So if I may request, start typing out your questions in the chat. That is one. And second, of course, just to introduce the session's topic today, as all of you are aware that it's around the challenges and opportunities of COVID-19 vaccine. So all of us have witnessed last 1 year, globally, very difficult times, but it is also opportunity for innovators world over to innovate. And today we have Mr. Rajiv Nath, who is one of the, I would say, the stalwarts of Indian medical industry. It, I would be short of words if I start introducing him because he has so many accomplishments. But I would say he's managing director of Hindustan Medical Devices, and I think almost everybody in India know his brand Discovan. And I have read a lot of articles from Mr. Nath in prominent Indian newspapers in the last few months, where he has been talking about India's vaccine preparation. So it is a great honor and pleasure to have you, sir, today. And I have also been admiring your work, sir, about rallying the Indian medical industry. You are also the forum coordinator of IMED. So you are not just representing your own venture, but you are also the voice of the industry, if I may say so. So thank you for joining us today, taking out your precious time. We have Dr. Arjun Dang, and although he may be one of the youngest person in this panel, but I think Dr. Dang's lab, at least in Delhi circles, is known for its quality. And I think if you read Dr. Dang's bio, I think it's quite evident that how much emphasis they pay on quality, and medical is all about quality. And I think I was just reading the introduction, about Dr. Dang's work, and I discovered that already in 2009 that Dr. Dang's lab was involved in testing of H1N1. So I have been as a customer also, in my private life, going to Dr. Dang's lab. So I can say that they are a organization which has many firsts, and these are testing times, and they are literally a testing organization. So they have pioneered a lot of initiatives in past. I was very amazed to hear from Dr. Arjun that they have played a very important role in the current vaccination uh, programs as well. And I think we will learn from him today about those important contributions around the safety procedures. So a very warm welcome to you, Dr. Arjun. Thanks for
Thank you.
joining. Uh, Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Shirshendu. So he's, so kind to us, always very generous with his time. He has been, I would say, a torch bearer for the Indian innovation landscape when it comes to the biotech industry. India is, I think, I would say, in Indian ecosystem, biotech has seen probably the most, I would say, the most number of innovative programs, and Dr. Shirshendu happens to lead one of them, which is called the Grand Challenges India. And those of you are not aware of Grand Challenges, it's a joint venture of Department of Biotechnology, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and Wellcome Trust. I may be, a bit incorrect here. So Dr. Shirshendu, feel free to correct me. But with my limited understanding, I have understood that this Grand Challenges India is taking up those kind of assignments which otherwise, are very important, but let's say are somehow missing, from the regular, let's say industry players have not taken up those innovations. So you're driving that innovation scene. I was also reading about on the Grand Challenges India website that you have also in past dealt with, topics linked with immunization. So while you may, not speak specifically, about uh, current vaccine topics, but I think with a very long term view of innovation in the country, I think you can help us today to understand what matters to India, when it comes to such pandemics. And maybe this is not the only pandemic the world is going to see. So I think we need your guidance, and I think a lot of people here, in their own capacity. I just saw that Dr. Amit Raj, for example, from Gujarat has joined. So we have many innovators in this room, who look upon to, solving tough problems. And I think your joining today, encourages and creates an example that uh, it's like a public-private partnership. So everybody is together and trying to solve these tough problems. And thank you, sir, for joining us today. A warm welcome to you as well. And I don't know if Dr. Frans Boom has also joined, because I can see a Dutch name, but it's on mute. So for everybody's interest, I will just mention briefly about Dr. Frans. So he's from Netherlands and he's representing an organization which is called the Human Vaccine Project. So you can imagine that he's totally okay. I can see Dr. Frans has joined. Dr. Frans, can you unmute yourself?
I definitely can. Good morning.
Okay, good morning.
Morning.
We really
I'm also
appreciate
fine.
we really appreciate
Yeah.
you joining 4 hours 30 minutes, uh, behind our time. So it's probably 5:30 a.m.
It is 5:30. Yeah, well, 5:40 now. I had problems in connecting, so apologies for that.
No
But
worries.
I'm
I,
thrilled to join the meeting and contribute to this important initiative.
yeah, I was just mentioning that you represent the Human Vaccines Project, and I think you are one of the person who can give us very much information on the vaccine topic, and we look forward to learn from you today. And we'd like to thank you for making taking out time, especially early morning, winter morning, that too, and joining us all the way from Netherlands. And I think let me not take up any more time, and I would like to welcome Dr. VK Singh, who is our Managing Director of InnovatioCuris, and he doesn't need any introduction, but Dr. VK Singh has a very long career in the medical field, around 50 years, and I think he has seen various dimensions of healthcare. Although I don't imagine that Dr. VK Singh, you must have seen a similar pandemic like COVID-19, but I'm sure with your wisdom, we can learn today. So over to you, Dr. VK Singh, for starting the program.
Well, thank you very much. I welcome all the participants and also all the my panelists. Uh, Sorry, because of some technical hitch, I took little time to join in. And little sore throat today morning, though I'm COVID negative, don't worry. It can't be transmitted through. Uh, the subject matter is known to you, and I will leave the introduction of speakers to the Sachin, who is the moderator, and he is our really a very important person in our organizations. He done a lot on cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and other things. So he will be moderating. I will give overall view of the today's club meeting. I especially one guest, Dr. Frans, I give you, Frans, I welcome you. As Sachin already told you, that early morning you are there, and this is really quite appreciable that you are there to share your views. As Sachin has said, this is our club meeting, which we do every alternate month. Next one is on 13th of March, 13th of March, and that would be the decided the topic as per the member club have the members. But this being important topic, we have allowed people to join in this particular session. Well, I was admiral of Indian Navy, and that is what my whole medical career was: Army, Navy, etc., and subsequently in teaching and other things. Yes, I've seen pandemic, but not pandemic. Sorry, the epidemics. Written some disaster document also, but not pandemic like this. I've seen the plague. I've seen other things which were there restricted to a particular region. Well, the topic is very fascinating because this is something after 100 years. It is something which has come after the Spanish flu. It is same like a virus you have, and 2018-19, the Spanish flu, which came up, and that's the Spanish flu. Is one important thing is that that is the time we did not know so much about the social distancing, mask, everything. Something was known. 500 million people got affected. That was one third of the population, and 50 million people died. So far, 2.06 million people have died. So we are better after 1 century. There is a lot of discussion that is it because of climatic changes, pollution, or because that is known that the books have written on the subject, the chikungunya, malaria, because of climatic changes, incidence has increased. So is it one of that or it is not one of that? The issue at large is in the particular pandemic, what we have, hardly anything is known. Though everybody said vaccine, vaccine, and the vaccine, a couple of them have come in the market, two have come in India itself, COVID Shield and Covaxin. But apart from that, there are many more are in the various countries which are there. But today news was that there is some mutated virus has been found in South Africa, Brazil, and it is overriding over antibiotics. And the UK says that the such mutation of the virus will be very, very dangerous and probably more death and other things. So we are still in learning curve and we are still in learning phase. And it is not what has been brought in the market in India. There's a lot of controversy you might have read and seen in TV. Back it because phase 3 trial in Covaxin has not been done. I recollect and remember I was there as a Deputy Chief Medical Officer of United Nations, and I was representing UN in one of the conference where malaria vaccine were being talked. I worked on a Thailand-Cambodia border where falciparum or cerebral malaria was rampant. And Americans have created a laboratory there. The German lady was about to be declared because she brought a vaccine. So she's about to get a Nobel Prize, but it stopped. Why? Because like this particular vaccine, there are three important things. What is the efficacy? So there are people who are saying X efficacy is Y, Z for different vaccine. How long it will be effective? Somebody says it is 6 months, 1 year. Like yellow fever vaccine is 10 years, and the tetanus it is 5 years, unless you give the booster dose. So we are totally blind that how long. Because of its emergency use, that something is better. Let's start. So like plasma therapy started, though ICM Indian, it is cleared, but now they are saying it is not that effective. Somebody started chloroquine, now they say it's not effective. Whatever is possible, they are trying. So this vaccine is also being tried. That how much it will be effective, time will tell. How long it will be effective, time will tell. I'm back to again to the malaria vaccine. The issue at large is when that lady worked and it was found this is only effective for 15 days to 1 month. That's too little a time. Cholera vaccine is for 6 months. So you must have at least 6 months or more, ideally speaking. So that is yet to be known which vaccine will be effective for how long. Efficacy, effective, and also will it be effective in mutational of the viruses. All that will be big learning. At present, one good thing, vaccine has come. The graph is going down. Death rate is less, but new challenges are still coming. And that is what is the mutated genes, etc. I was talking to a couple of experts, and everybody is talking about that will we have started vaccine, but we are groping in the dark. Why we are groping in dark, we don't have an answer. So this will be big learning. And today's topic is, I don't think anybody can give a clear-cut opinion on the subject, but definitely it has challenges. It has brought the opportunities. The scientists, which take years together to develop the vaccine, they have developed it a couple of months, 9 to 10 months or so. So the opportunities are there, challenges are there, and speakers have been picked up accordingly. Somebody who is a big manufacturer of the syringes, because you require more syringes, innovator like Dr. Shirshendu Mukherjee, laboratory services, Dr. Dang, and also a person of stature from Europe to do something to that he is a part of the vaccine strategy. I'll not take much time, but I will have only last point that we are famous in India frugal innovation. So is it one of the such thing somebody can grow in the frugal type of innovation and subsequently refine it further? Idea is to save the manpower, humankind, and carry on for future. I once again thank you everyone to join in early morning on Saturday, and also the person who is speaking very early hour from abroad, Dr. Frans. Thank you very much. I hand over to Sachin, who will take you around for the whole next 2 hours or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. VK Singh. In spite of a sore throat, your words of wisdom, gives us, a path forward. And I totally agree with you. I think many of the questions that you are raising that we don't have an answer, but I think still we are living in the times of the fake news, and it is important that we learn from the experts and dispel some of the myths and understand from a scientific perspective where, how, and when from a COVID-19 perspective we are going to overcome this challenge. I have already taken an opportunity before you joined, Dr. VK Singh, to introduce our speakers today. And I also want to make this discussion very, from a human dimension. So let me start with the first round of discussion, where I would request, Dr. Dang, then, to start with introducing himself and maybe also share with us how has been the last 1 year. And then we go to Mr. Frans, then Mr. Rajiv Nath, and last Dr. Shirshendu. If you can share, take 2, 3, 4 minutes, what you have been doing for last 1 year apart from introducing yourself. So over to you, Dr. Dan.
Thank you, Sachin, and thank you, Dr. V.K. Singh, for including me in this very prestigious panel today. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be a part of these interactions today. So Sachin, certainly the last year has been life-changing. There have been immense learnings that we've had to overcome during these very difficult months. And I still remember those days when there was complete lockdown in the country and all global supply chains were also hampered. And we had to work with a dozen of different sites all over India to get the vaccine trial samples to our central lab in New Delhi. So certainly robust systems and more than a qualified team, a very motivated team was what was required. And being the CEO of Dr. Dang's lab and handling these clinical trials for various vaccine players has been a huge learning curve for us. Also, innovating while testing, that is testing by RT-PCR for COVID-19, was a huge challenge as well. And with the government's mandate of test, trace, and treat, I think the past year, what has changed is that the authorities and the lay population as well have realized that diagnostics is as important as therapeutics, especially in a pandemic where we are dealing with so much infectivity, everyone needing to get tested, even if asymptomatic and even if they've had exposure. The first stop is to get a test. Along with that, increasing awareness, giving the right information to the lay person is also very important. So if you still remember, the WHO called this, before they called it a pandemic, they called it an infodemic. So again, training, education, awareness was critical in the initial stages. And after that, ramping up a capacity, capability, and also training our staff took most of our time. But I'm very glad to know and also hope and pray that we are beyond this pandemic now, and that there are brighter days to come in the future. But certainly, Sachin, this has been a huge learning curve for us. And I feel the pandemic has made us press the reset button in our lives, pause, sit back, and think what could have been done better. Thank you so much, Sachin.
I could still see the smile on your face. So I think this last 1 year has, kept the smile on. So I think that's very important to keep your team motivated. And I totally agree with you that these have been testing times. And I think learning, as an organization has not happened over the months, but by the minute. I think especially in the early days, because, everything was so dynamic, right? That you don't know what's happening and where. So thank you again, Dr. Arjun, for sharing this last 1 year. Mr. Frans, how has been the last 1 year? I just read yesterday KLM has cancelled all the flights. Is the situation getting more tougher right now in Netherlands? How has been your journey? And please
Well,
also share some words about human vaccine projects as well.
yes, sure, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think that Arjun basically captured everything. It has been it's an unprecedented year, and 2020, when the history books are written, is going to be the year of the COVID pandemic. It's quite interesting because in 2019 we were actually working on developing a proposal, and there was a joint European Union Government of India initiative, a proposal on pandemic influenza. Because I think that many people around the world thought, if there's going to be, or not if, when there's going to be a pandemic, it's going to be an influenza pandemic. And then it turned out that it was not influenza, but a coronavirus that basically almost stopped everything that we were, used to be doing. So The human vaccines project, and maybe I can say a little bit more about that later. The ultimate goal of the human vaccines project is to decode the human immune system and develop an artificial intelligence model of the immune system, which will help us a lot, not only to understand better, the infectious diseases, but also autoimmune diseases and diseases like cancer. But vaccines are basically the only intervention that has proven to be effective against infectious diseases. So we use vaccines in a way as a probe and as a platform to better understand the immune system. So that's the ultimate goal. And one of the biggest challenges, I think, for in 2020 for us was that everybody is so focused on that it's very difficult to keep a long-term agenda on the radar of policymakers, politicians, etc. And I think that keeping that long-term agenda or that is critically important to continue to think about that long-term agenda. So obviously the Human Vaccines Project also started the COVID-19 or a COVID vaccine initiative. We provide on a weekly basis, we have the global lab meetings where people actually from the COVID vaccines, the COVID vaccine field have the opportunity to share the progress, the challenges, the big issues. And thirdly, we have, in a way, the way in which clinical trials work is that when it comes to infectious diseases like corona or influenza or pertussis, the vaccines are not tested in the most vulnerable population. That's the population, the elderly population. And so we know very little about the effectiveness or the efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines in people older than 70 or 75, and in people with pre-existing morbidities. And that's exactly the population, that's one of the priorities with the healthcare workers to be vaccinated. So we're making the case that it's important to actually use the long-term community-based cohort studies where a lot of information is collected on disease history, on genetics, on lifestyle, to use these long-term cohorts that people have been participating in for 20 or 25 years to better understand why some people have a very good response to COVID-19 vaccines, why some people have a very poor response to vaccines, and why a number of people have actually are suffering from severe adverse events. And eventually develop a more predictive model of why vaccines work in different populations. And we know, for example, that hepatitis B, 3 shots give a lifetime protection for 95% of the population. 5% is not protected after 3 shots, but 25% is protected after 1 shot. So I think we have to go from a general vaccination strategy to a more subpopulation-based strategy based on an in-depth knowledge of the immune system.
Yeah,
we'll keep it like that for the time being.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I take this comment, in a very much emphasized way that you mentioned about diversity, in the clinical trial of the population age groups. We have just seen that in Norway, 29 people have died, and the Norwegian health authorities have now revised the protocol, and they don't want to give vaccine to people who are above 75. So I think we're going to discover a lot of this diversity-based, missing population groups, as different countries discover, when the vaccine is given to the population. So very, very important point raised by you, Mr. Frans. Thank you for that. So now, Mr. Rajiv Nath, if I can request you to say a few words about your work, what's happening at Hindustan Medical Devices, in Indian medical industry at large, and what has been your last 1 year's journey? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Gaur. Pleasure to be here, everybody. Uh, this last 1 year has been a complete roller coaster of a year. It started with the announcement of the lockdown with a 4 hours notice. And of course, our plant did not close down. We were running right throughout the shutdown. In fact, I was busy coordinating with the government and the rest of the industry in getting the various factories of medical devices up and running and getting permissions from various deputy commissioners and state governments to allow them to operate. Otherwise, there would be a huge crisis in the country on medical devices. And the whole purpose of the lockdown was to build infrastructure on healthcare side and on the medical device manufacturing side, because India had been so much import dependent, even for basic things like masks and PPE coveralls. So I would say nearly 30-40% of my time of last year has gone into helping the industry ramp up capacities to meet the national challenges, coordinating with the government in seeing that what policy decisions would be helpful to get the industry up and running very rapidly, reaching out to other associations, whether the Textile Association or the Garment Association or the Garment Exporters Association, and seeing our automotive manufacturers and seeing other manufacturers from diverse industries would come into making medical devices. So very interesting year, definitely on that front. And then from April, June onwards, having realized that there are many companies in the world working on the vaccine front, it was a simple calculation for me to understand that finally there'll be more vaccines available worldwide, just a matter of time, but there may not be enough, the right kind of syringes available for drug delivery. So we wanted to reach out to the government and to WHO and to the UN bodies who are normally doing this kind of procurement to impress upon them the need for start procuring the products and start stockpiling, so there would be no shortages like happened in the case of masks and PPE kits and thermometers, where in India, we allowed the shortages to go to such an extreme level in January, February, and March. So thankfully, there has been a good communication on that front. Many countries and many government organizations and UN bodies did start realizing the need for doing that, and they have come forward to us and to other manufacturers. And I would say the supply chain is now, I would say, humming on that front.
Thank you, sir, for your leadership. I think India definitely was suffering in the very initial days, as you rightly pointed out, but correct me if I'm wrong. Now we are even exporting what we were importing, like these PPE kits to mask and so on and so forth. I think industry did a great job, and I think I have seen in various programs, government has also, kind of recognized and appreciated. So I think this pandemic has made probably everybody stronger. And I think thanks to contribution of people like you to rally, everyone in the right direction. And we will look forward to learn more from you, how we are preparing for the vaccine drive. And let me thank you again. And let me ask Dr. Shirshendu, because he must be having a top view, looking at industry, what Mr. Nath is doing, looking at Dr. Arjun, what is happening in the testing industry. Sir, if I may request you to say a few words, how has been your last 1 year? Also, maybe share a few words about your current role with the government. How are you looking to promote innovation?
Thank you, Sachin, and thank you, Admiral Singh, for this invite. And it is a pleasure to be in company of Rajiv, Arjun, and Dr. Frans to be and talking to you all. As said by my earlier, co-panelist, it has been a challenging but interesting and a learning year for all of us. It has been a year which has taught us how to work in teams, how to work in groups, how to work remotely, and how to work with the community to address challenges. And I think everybody rose to the occasion. I'm talking about India, and everybody rose to this occasion. We announced, tentatively, we all started working. After I think 1st or the 5th of March, I never traveled outside Delhi except in last month. I had to go to Hyderabad, but the things where everybody got together within the system. As Arjun rightly said, and Rajiv also said that we 15th of March, when the pandemic was taking its shape, and as rightly said, infodemic by Arjun, we need to understand, we need to get information. We started gathering together, and the innovation played a very critical role here. There were, if you see, there were, 5, 6 platforms of innovations which we started looking at from our various model. One was, of course, vaccine was one of the platform which I think everybody will talk about. I'll not talk about much on that. But first thing was management of the disease, management, and we needed innovation to manage those disease, like getting sanitizers in place, getting thermal scanners in place, getting PPEs in place, getting ventilators in place. I think that our innovation community got together. Then second thing was diagnostics. Diagnose and then manage, and then come therapeutics, drugs, and then vaccines. I think we created 5 of these platforms within our innovation ecosystem. BioRack DBT joined together to announce the COVID consortium call on 15th of March, which where our startup community, our innovators, our academic researchers, our industries all got together with under these different verticals. And as you rightly said, initially we were not self-sufficient in PPEs and other, ventilators and other things. But right now we are innovating. We almost funded around 130, 140 projects. 15th March we announced a call. 30th March we closed, and then within 15th of April we, we funded the projects, and things started moving. Funding is one thing, you can fund a lot of things, but if the community doesn't rise to the occasion, coming to this, I think that was very important. But our startups, our innovators, our academics, our industry rose to that occasion to take that funding. Funding is just to de-risk that, but to create that funding, develop prototypes, iterate that prototypes, validate that prototypes, and bring it to the market. That was there. So, that the diagnostic manufacturers got together, organization, and Arjun's father helped us a lot in, identifying, and other colleagues helped us a lot in identifying the right type of device to be funded or diagnostic kits to be funded. So I think the government, the innovators, everybody worked together, and that is what this pandemic has taught us to work in groups, work in teams to really deliver innovations which when used. And then, so I call it in India, for India, and beyond. We really worked on that line, on that slogan, and now we are self-sufficient in a number of things. I'll stop here, and then I'll come back to later on the questions.
Thank you, sir. I think COVID was indeed maybe dark times, but I think for people like you who are, whose day job is to bring innovation to the country, I think this was also the golden opportunity in that sense, because it brought everyone together, and it kind of took us to the next level, took us to the next orbit. So thank you for everyone sharing this first round of your last 1 year's contribution. And I think you must have all learned that we have very diverse contributions here in this panel. And although the panel is around vaccine, but we can say that vaccine is only one part of dealing with this entire issue of pandemic. So let me jump into the next round, and I also invite our participants today, if they have a point of view to share, feel free to write it in the chat, and I will invite you to say your point of view at the appropriate moment. So let me jump now to the round 2, which is about the dealing with the pandemic and vaccine drive at hand. And I would like to invite Mr. Frans here again. So COVID-19 vaccine, France, seems to be a miracle, right? I don't know if you have read the story of the German-Turkish couple from BioNTech, right? That they are now among the 100 richest people in Germany because they partnered with Pfizer and they brought out this vaccine. And probably uh, we can say that vaccine has never you know uh, compressed so much in the time. So what is your point of view? All the companies in the world racing to, let's say a few months back, everybody was racing that who would come out first. And then Pfizer, Moderna, now AstraZeneca here in India. We have also one more here in India. It's called Bharat Biotech. So what from you, if you like to highlight for us the challenges and opportunities of bringing out vaccine for COVID-19?
The interesting thing is that now, first of all, before I go into vaccines, I want to reiterate what was mentioned earlier in the discussion, is that vaccines are an absolutely critical component of the toolbox. But in order to deal with pandemics, we also have to look beyond vaccines. We have to look at antivirals for corona infections. But I think the pandemic also the absolutely critical importance of non-pharmaceutical interventions. In terms of social distancing, in terms of the willingness to be tested, the face masks, all of these things turn out to be pretty critical when it comes to dealing with a pandemic. The second thing is, and Dr. Singh alluded to that, is that if you look at the influenza, the influenza pandemic preparedness plans, it was almost that people were thinking we can deal with the pandemic in 1 year. But the flu epidemic of 1918 was not a 1980 pandemic. It turned out it was 3 years. And I think that COVID-19 shows us the unpredictability of a virus in terms of its mutations, and that we should not base our policy interventions on the premise that we can deal with the pandemic in 1 year. That being said, I think the efforts from the academic institutions, the biotechs, and big pharma in combination with governments and international organizations has been unprecedented. And to a certain extent, the investments that were made in different vaccines platforms are paying off now. Some of the platforms are new, the mRNA vaccines. Some of the platforms like the Oxford, AstraZeneca, the Janssen vaccines, the platform had been tested and proved in the past with MERS, with SARS, with Ebola. If we had not invested in those new technologies, then it would have been a lot more difficult to develop a vaccine at such a speed. But I think it's amazing how many vaccines were actually tested in large populations in such a short period of time, were licensed, they were approved and licensed and marketed in a very short time. I think that's going to be a very important lesson also for the pandemic influenza preparedness plans, because I think there's a lot that can be learned from the COVID-19 experience. When it comes to the challenges, all of us knew what a couple of very important challenges were, and that was the deployment of vaccines. And I want to say two things about that. The first is that I worked 10 years with the International Vaccines Initiative. And access to vaccines was one of the pillar programs of IAVI. And we advocated for advanced market commitments, so that actually governments in particular would invest in vaccines before the vaccine was developed. And now with the COVID pandemic, you see that governments exactly did that. They took a risk. You know, they ordered vaccines. There was a market commitment, and there was a big driver for industry to act upon it, because there was a sort of guarantee that if they would have developed vaccines, if they would scale up their manufacturing capacity, that actually governments would buy the vaccines. So that kind of mechanisms have been very important in speeding up the development of COVID-19 vaccines. So, but there's also a number of limitations and challenges for the future. You know, to start with one, we know that at this point, the continued spread of the epidemic is primarily due to young people. People younger, you know, also younger than 19 years. Vaccines have not been tested. Current vaccines have not been tested in people younger than 19. So there is this question, you know, what will be the side effects if you start vaccinating young people? And there's going to be this tension between, you know, the healthcare prerogative and the public health prerogative. Are we going to vaccinate the older people because they're more vulnerable, or are we going to vaccinate the younger people in order to contain the spread of the epidemic? So that's a big challenge. The other challenge, the big challenge that I've already mentioned, is that we have very limited knowledge about the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines in the elderly and in people with pre-existing morbidities. The third group where the vaccines have not been tested is the group of pregnant women and lactating women. So if we start vaccinating that population, what will be the impact on the mother, but also on the fetus and the child when it's born? So ideally you would have and I think those are the challenges, but also the opportunities in the next couple of months and years. You know, the characteristics of an ideal vaccine is that it is safe in all ages, including immunocompromised people and pregnant and lactating women. That has high efficacy in all age groups. That it provides a direct protection, early onset and long-lived. That it is a single dose, not 2 doses. That it can be administered without needles and syringes, that no cold chain is required, that vaccinated persons do not shed virus following exposure to SARS-CoV-2, that is amenable to large-scale manufacturing, and can also be administered with other vaccines if they are available. And gaps that need to be filled is, in addition to what I already mentioned, is that we have to expand the evidence base on vaccine efficacy against severe COVID-19, against fatal COVID-19, against subclinical infections and virus shedding, on preventing COVID-19 in households, and efficacy in children and the elderly. Then big issues that need to be addressed, and Dr. Singh mentioned that already, is the duration of protection. We don't know how long the vaccine is going to work. The optimal schedule for public health and individual protection, there is a huge debate now in Europe, but I think it's also in the rest of the world. Can you delay the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine, you know, from 3 weeks to 6 weeks or a couple of months? can you actually use, can you have six doses of vaccines from instead of 5, which would expand the number of people that you vaccinate significantly. The other big challenge is the mutations. Are the vaccines protective against the Brazilian, the South African, the British variant? So it's the impact of the strain evolution. And then, what's the potential? Because all of us are, thinking about that. What's the potential of vaccines for the generation of herd immunity? So a lot of questions that still need to be answered. For me, challenges and opportunities are the two sides of the same coin. We have been talking a lot over the last 20 years to make vaccines available to disfranchised populations and poorer countries. I think those investments are paying off. Countries like India have invested significantly in their R&D capacity, and the prerogative for vaccine development was very much based in Western companies. That has changed completely. India is an absolutely key player in not only in vaccine manufacturing, but also in vaccine R&D. And those investments are paying off. So deploying vaccines much faster to poor countries, disenfranchised populations we're going to see a revolution there, because manufacturers in India and China will contribute significantly to making vaccines available to all populations around the world. So that's one thing. The other thing is that there's a lot of anti-vaxxers have had a significant role in basically questioning vaccine reliability, safety, confidence, hesitancy. And that will continue also with COVID-19. But COVID-19 also gives us an opportunity to better understand why people are hesitant and actually develop strategies to be proactive instead of more of reactive, and make sure that people do understand the critical importance of hygiene and vaccination for their own health, for the health of their children, for the health of their family, for the health of the community. I think there's an opportunity there. Often it's a nuisance, to have to deal with anti-vaxxers, but we also have to listen to them, because we can only learn from them. So I think a lot of challenges ahead of us, but maybe the biggest gain for the world is that COVID-19 has shown us how vulnerable we are, and how important infectious disease management is. It has been quite challenging over the last 20 years to get significant amounts of resources allocated to infectious diseases. A couple of years ago, there was fortunately a huge effort on antimicrobial resistance. I believe, and I'm confident that the global community actually realizes that vaccine development needs to be continued and needs to be intensified in order to deal with this epidemic, but also with future pandemics. Because this is not going to be the end of epidemics and pandemics, and this gives us an unprecedented opportunity to prepare better for the future.
Yeah, thank you, Frans, for enumerating a lot of challenges. I don't know if I lost count, maybe more than 10 variables that you mentioned, from an ideal wish list, that how this vaccine could look like, to the current topics where I think organizations like Gavi and others are also working right now that I think it's I'm forgetting the name of the consortium which is trying to buy Covaxin. Is it that you mentioned about access to disinfection?
Yeah, the COVAX.
COVAX, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important, and I think right in the very beginning you also talked about the pandemic's sudden shock, like how it came to the world. I remember over the Christmas dinner, I was talking to some Italian friends of my wife, and they were saying that in Italy the politicians have lost the vocabulary. So they introduced in Italian the word lockdown as it is, whereas the Italians were unhappy that the French has translated the word lockdown in French. Okay, so it's like a perfect translation. So I don't know if you have the Dutch translation of lockdown, but here in India, we also use the word lockdown. So you can imagine if you see the word lockdown world over, right? If a country has translated it, this means that they are not shocked. And if a country has not translated it and the lay people now use the word lockdown as if it always existed in the vocabulary, that means that the country has taken it as a shock. And I was so amazed on this cultural dimension that what is making Italians so unhappy is that the politician is using the word lockdown and not say the Italian equivalent. But I think you have raised a lot of interesting points, and I think it gives us a segue to Dr. Dang's topic, because I think he has been dealing with these clinical trials. So while you have raised the questions, let's see if Dr. Dang can provide us an answer. So Dr. Arjun, over to you. What is your point of view on these diverse groups missing in the clinical trials? Can you share with us?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Sachin, for this question. So certainly the entire clinical trial process in the development of any vaccine or any drug is to get a product that is safe, efficacious, and as per the regulatory requirements. So as a broad view, there are 4 stages for the development of any vaccine or drug. The first stage being the lab or the in vitro stage. The second one being the preclinical stage, that is also known as toxicology studies, wherein animal trials are carried out. The third one and the most important stage being the clinical stage, that we also call as FIM, that is first in man. This clinical stage has 3 phases, that is phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And then fourth is the post-marketing surveillance stage, that is post-licensing of the vaccine. When we come to the clinical stage, that is first in man, phase 1 is usually up to about 100 volunteers. In this stage, the volunteers who are recruited are first tested as a baseline or as a screening tool to get the volunteers that are healthy and as per the study design. Moving on to the phase 2 of the clinical stage, we usually have volunteers or participants or subjects up to about 300 people. In this stage, again, the safety studies are done along with the efficacy studies. And then if everything goes well, these proceed into phase 3 that are much larger and also across borders and geographies and ethnicities, along with bridging studies as well. So safety testing is an integral component of clinical development of any such drug or vaccine, wherein the sponsor, that is the pharma company or the investigator or the clinician, they select and recruit subjects in the trial and they need to perform a battery of tests, starting from basic tests like blood glucose and hemoglobin to your viral markers to other tests to ascertain the baseline before screening these people and deeming them fit to be a part of the trial. Once they are enrolled in the trial, they are given the dosages of the vaccine over a particular frequency. So you have visit 1, visit 2, visit 3, over which all the safety parameters are monitored regularly to see in case the drug or the vaccine is producing any kind of side effects. All of these processes are as per biomedical ethics and globally harmonized set of standards that are laid down, and it is a very rigorous process. The core value, when we talk about safety testing, the core value of a quality central safety lab is consistency. To do it right each time, to have a very high level of accuracy, a very good turnaround time, and very robust logistics. For any vaccine, the reason for that is because coordinating with each and every lab at every site is certainly a major challenge. Every lab has different methodologies, different SOPs, different softwares to follow, and hence the sponsors usually prefer a single central lab where all these samples of all the phases come in for the safety testing. Again, having dealt with these safety studies and various developers of these vaccines, we have realized that from starting, that is the study design, even test selection, even site training, kit building, logistics, all of these requires advanced technology, a very robust system, and a very qualified quality control team as well. And further, moving forward, also what should be kept in mind is that the lab network for doing all of this is extremely important to accelerate the development of these quality products that can be used as prophylaxis in case of these pandemics and infectious diseases.
I think there's a lot of scientific aspects which probably further can be, made accessible for lay people. But I think Frans made a very important point that there's another side of the population which is anti-vaccine, and you are fully invested, in bringing the quality aspect, in this vaccine development. So maybe a very brief response from your side.
Sure.
How he asked that you should invest in developing strategies to make vaccine uptake better. So, and he impressed on that this is the time, or this is the COVID also gives us that opportunity, because that fear or that misinformation is for any vaccine in general. So
Sure.
any strategy for that plan?
Sure. So there's this new terminology that I've been thinking about. I call it vaccitency. So it's vaccine hesitancy that our generation currently is facing. Probably it's because of too much knowledge over media or too much incorrect information that is going out. Even the people and even the volunteers who've taken the vaccine in various countries, there's a very detailed to actually decipher that are the side effects or the deaths in certain cases because of the side effects of the vaccine itself. But certainly the need of the hour is to get a vaccine, irrespective of which one it is, because we have to trust our scientists. We have to have trust in our various regulatory authorities. And it is only after thorough research and trials that these have been brought to the layman. Obviously, keeping in mind that the human civilization has never really faced such a pandemic. So there are systems in place. There are opportunities where we need to accelerate the delivery of these vaccines. But at the same time, there are a lot of guidelines also that need to be followed. For example, any vaccine that is given is supposed to be given in a monitored environment with the presence of a qualified anesthetist in case of an allergic reaction, and also a mandatory observation time in which the person needs to be monitored and observed for any impending reaction. So I would say that this hashtag vaccitency is what we need to deal with now, with proper awareness, with proper education tools, and certainly with help of the media to spread the word that currently the only key to this lock of coronavirus are the vaccines that our scientists have developed.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Arjun. And let me bring in Mr. Nath here, sir. You mentioned about lack of syringes, and earlier when the pandemic started, lack of many essential, medical supplies, and we overcame them. But maybe your point of view, what is the your estimate that what is the vaccine requirement in terms of syringes? Are we having enough? And also your opinion on, by when do you think India will be able to vaccinate, let's say, a large portion of its population, maybe 60 to 70%? And maybe one more question to it, if you can extend that to from India to world. And I think the syringes that are needed for vaccines, they should be only one-time use, if I'm not wrong, because we have to prevent the infection from spreading. So is there also an aspect of medical waste there that needs to be handled properly? So over to you, sir, if you can share with us.
Thank you, Mr. Gaur. So for vaccines, there are more than 250 vaccine candidates out in the open or under development, and most of them would be out by middle or end of this year, and some by early 2022. We've already seen the launch of 4 of them worldwide now, which are being sold to certain countries and to the COVAX facility of WHO Gavi directly. So along with the supply chain of the vaccines are required the drug delivery mechanisms like syringes and needles. The world can be divided into different geographies. So you have USA and Western Europe, which would be using disposable syringes with a needle stick prevention needle device, which is together called a safety syringe kind of a mechanism. And that's what is required by the legislation over there. Then you have got most of South America, most of Central America, quite a bit of Middle East, most of Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and Asia, looking for standard disposable syringes for the vaccine delivery. And then you've got the bulk of Africa, many parts of Central America and South America, and the whole of South Asia, around, I would say, 70 countries in all, where there has been a huge evidence of syringes being reused because of the poor nature of these economies of these countries and a culture of thrift because of limited resources. So over there, because of the risk of reuse, nearly 20 years back, there had been a mandate that for vaccination programs, auto-disabled syringes would be used so that there would be a single one-time use. So that's how the geographies are divided, or the demand is divided. In India, we have been using as a country auto-disabled syringes for vaccination programs for more than 15 years now. And also many states use it for even for many curative injections also in public healthcare to prevent infection from reuse of syringes. Coming to the demand side by quantum, in India, for a population of 1.3 billion, if 60 to 70% are going to be injected with the vaccination, then around 800 million syringes or 800 million vaccination shots are required. If the vaccination is going to be single dose, then you need 800 million. If it's going to be double dose, which is seemingly more or less the case, at least with the Serum Institute vaccine, the Covaxin trials are still undergoing. So it seems to be like a double shot, but not fully proven until the clinical trials are over. And then you will have other candidates coming forward from Cadila and from Johnson Johnson, etc., which may be single dose. So we are looking at a demand only for India for about 1.6 billion syringes. Internationally, we are looking at a demand of more than 5 billion shots minimum, going up to 10 billion shots as a range. In terms of supply demand, when it comes to syringes, I would say there are enough manufacturers in the world to make disposable syringes. So if there is going to be no restrictive or preference for a product design, then there are enough disposable syringes available in the world to give the vaccination. So there'll be no shortage of syringes as such per se, whether in India or outside of India. When we come to India and the countries who have the problem of reuse, especially in mass vaccination programs, then AD syringes are required. And again, over there are typically two kinds of designs which are available. One in which the injection is given at the beginning or during the injection, and a second one in which the disabling mechanism is at the end of the injection. So different countries and different geographies may have different availability by the domestic manufacturers, but both are permissible under the ISO standard. The quantum of the production which is required in India, the target which the country has set up for us, before it was not very clear, but we've had a lot of rounds of discussions with the government, Ministry of Health in the last couple of months. And now the government has pretty much firmed up that they would like to vaccinate at least 300 million people of the vulnerable population by July or August this year. Now, that is a huge challenging target, because when you quantify to numbers, it's a huge number per day. I'll give you an example. Currently, we are trying to vaccinate healthcare workers and frontline workers. And 1 week has gone by, and it has taken us time to come to a level of 2 lakhs vaccinations per day to achieve that number. Okay. My company is itself, we are one of the many manufacturers. Of course, we are the leading manufacturer. We are currently manufacturing more than 24 lakh auto-disable syringes for 0.5 ml for COVAX facility and Government of India per day. So approximately half coming to India and half going over there. So if we are allocating nearly 13 lakh to 15 lakh syringes per day to India, that means the country will take 1 year's time at 13 lakh syringes or injections per day. If we have to do that in 6 months' time, we should be injecting 26 lakh people per day or 2.6 million people per day in India. Then only we can vaccinate in 6 months' time the target what we're talking about. Now, to come from 200,000 shots per day to 1.3 million is going to be a huge challenge. It's not impossible, but it is definitely a challenge which needs to be geared up. And now that the focus is there, it is a doable number which can be achieved. On our part, we are ramping up capacity. We've already increased by more than 40% from what we were doing in June last year. And we plan to increase by another 40-50% by June this coming year. So from something like 560 million syringes per annum of 0.5 ml auto-disable, we'll be making more than 1.2 billion per annum by July this year. Now that is only for India and the COVAX facility or the countries which use also auto-disable. We'll also be supplying the standard disposable syringes and other manufacturers too, like the 1 ml tuberculosis syringe or the 2 ml or the 3 ml syringes. To various countries would be using the standard disposable syringes for vaccination. We've sent a shipment recently to Japan, to the government over there for the vaccination. And currently we are executing orders for Brazil, for example. So the challenge which has been thrown for us has been vaccines like Pfizer. Because certainly it came forward to our knowledge in November only, very late, that they need a 0.3 ml injection. And there was no auto-disable syringes with that fixed dose available. So rapidly we had to modify our molds and our machines. And we could do that by December end and apply for WHO PQS, which we got in the first week of January. And recently we got our first orders for the COVAX facility and also for such specific countries like Georgia, who will be using the Pfizer vaccine, and they need a matching auto-disable syringe alongside with that. So that's a new challenge. Going forward, there'll be other challenges because different vaccines have got different innovative drug delivery mechanisms. So these are the various kinds of innovative designs which are available in terms of drug delivery, or at least in syringes.
Let me first congratulate you, sir. I think it really takes a dynamic way of working to adjust your production, as you said the example of Pfizer. Because I was wondering myself, here in India we are not having those kind of extreme cold temperatures that Pfizer requires, and definitely that's how most of the European countries are preferring the Pfizer vaccine right now. So definitely the mechanisms are different, and it's good to hear from you that you are already also contributing not just to India but also globally. Great to know, sir. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So over to now Dr. Shirshendu. Sir, you have heard all the three gentlemen here bringing a lot of needs from the ground, a lot of gaps. So what is your point of view? Especially I would like to hear, building on what was a follow-up question to Dr. Arjun from Mr. Frans, that how do you address the larger population here in India also, which may be having the vaccine hesitancy, right? So I think it's, I don't know if maybe I'm incorrect here, but I read on your website about this immunization program. So have you dealt with these kind of challenges before? Are there digital innovations or solutions that can be made which are on behavior change communication? Or how do you, in general, like various requirements also shared by Mr. Nath, adjusting to the different kind of drug delivery mechanisms. What is your point of view, sir, listening to a wide variety of points here?
I think, thank you, Sachin, once again. And I think Arjun really covered it very nicely on the total, span of how vaccine is developed, first in lab studies, developing the clones, the microbe is tuned to express that protein, and then in animal studies, and then pre-tox, then for safety studies in man, then immunogenicity studies, and then efficacy studies, and then the rolling out. So that is the entire process of vaccine development. Our role has been to fund the innovation part of it. And as Rajiv also pointed out, the two vaccines are out now. 2 or 3 are immediately going to follow in next 2 to 3 months. And then, as you have heard everywhere, we have funded through the DBT COVID Consortium, the National Biopharma Mission of the Government of India. We have funded around 30 vaccine candidates, which are in various stages of development in academics or in the industry in the various stages. So I think we have a very strong portfolio of vaccines. And again, thanks to the innovators in the academic and the industry and the community to develop that. So we have a strong portfolio of vaccine, and this is what our pandemic has taught us. This is a unique, first in a lifetime for me at least, and all of us are almost, is that we have, and this has taught us how to work to, and this will be a really, creates a platform to work, as you initially asked, for future pandemics. I think it is a big learning for us how to work together and take it together. That is one aspect of it. Now, the vaccine development part, as was described, and the thing is, it is not only the vaccine part which is to be developed. There are a lot of other things parallelly needs to be developed, which, within our systems, we really enabled, as we call ourselves as an enabler of the innovation ecosystem in India, BioRack Grand Challenges, DBT, and these national, we are the enablers. So we really created that enablers also along with the core vaccine. You need to develop trial sites, where you are going to test the vaccines. You need to develop assays, where the bioassays will be done for the serums collected on the follow-ups of the vaccine trials. Then you need to develop, you need to build capacities for people who are going to do these trials. So I think we were all, this infrastructure or this paraphernalia need to be created. And, we really went up and did all these parallelly. And now we have created number of trial sites, the assay protocols validated, and, which are being used. Biorepositories have been created. And, the genome sequencing of the virus, we have almost deposited 2,000. Some number of sequences in the global repositories as well, which has been collected from India. So I think this basic scientific knowledge about the virus, which will help us to develop vaccines, diagnostics, and another tools, therapeutics or monoclonals and other things for the treatment, have requires a lot of strong scientific backbone. So that I think we enabled, and that got created. Again, it is not just funding which enables it. It needs to bring in scientific temper, innovators, and we are literally, by the clarion call of our Honorable Prime Minister on Atmanirbhar Bharat. Rajiv is here, supplying vaccines to the world. Arjun, they really led the diagnostic part of it. So I think everybody stood up to the occasion to create that and support that. That is one element of the enabling ecosystem. The platforms were created, and that was done. Not only in India, we supported all our major neighboring countries, our friendly countries were supported around it. And now we are exporting vaccines to them. We are exporting a lot of other things, PPEs and other things also is going out of India. So really, we did that. You are coming to your question on, vaccines delivery. That is not actually into our mandate. We are innovation, so that falls differently. But we through a grand challenges portfolio, not for COVID, but before 2 years back, we launched a call on called immunization data management system called Idea Challenge, which way we were looking at. We were trying to develop tools of identifying the gaps in vaccine consumption and coverage. Basically, how much is the consumption and what is the coverage. So develop a tool around that time. So that what we were working for our childhood immunization program. We were asked to develop tools for that, and those platforms have been created, which are very handy to work around various vaccines. Only it is not it was focused on a childhood immunization strategy, but it can be scaled up for various vaccine platforms. As regarding hesitancy is concerned, and very aptly again told by Arjun, any vaccine which comes out has a strict protocols to be followed. And nothing can come out without a strategic protocol. It goes through number of tests, number of processes, number of evaluations, and then it comes out. So I think when it comes out, and we have one of the robust regulatory system around the world, with one of the best regulatory systems around the world. So, anything, we have experts, we have academics who do excellent work, the innovators who do it, people who deliver it, like Rajesh. So we have the best quality systems, the protocols, and develop. So I think anything new takes time. I think it will go off, but I can rest assured that we have the best system, the best vaccines are available, and it will slowly go out. The portfolio will increase as we move around. Thank you, Sachin.
Thank you, sir. Just maybe a bit of trivia. I think you already know the recent results of the CASP14 challenge. Made this Google's company DeepMind with their AlphaFold as a winner. And I'm sure that you are aware of this challenge, but just for everyone, it is about protein folding prediction. And what I was reading, in general, that use of AI, and I think Frans mentioned about his interest using AI models for human immunization. I think one of the biggest breakthrough in general about the COVID was this year, or last year, sorry, that how quickly we understood the molecule structure. And getting the molecule structure right was, I think, an understanding, where it attaches to the human cell and how the pathway is. I think that was a very fundamental knowledge that was shared around the world very fast. And I think that led to a faster vaccine development. So last year, sir, I was attending a webinar from Norway, and they were very keen that how can they bring a company like AlphaFold, not a company, but made it in open source, so that the future understanding of virus structures can be done immediately, because AlphaFold is a private company and they will not share this private proprietary knowledge to everyone, but pandemics will impact everyone. So I don't know if this is also probably one submission from my side. If you have not considered, maybe you can consider that how fast the sequencing of these molecules and the structures could be understood, because as the mutations will happen, I think there is a possibility today that using AI we can even predict which mutation will occur before it actually happens. So you can already adjust your vaccine in preparation. Like Serum Institute, they prepared or manufactured the AstraZeneca vaccine in advance, and they took a huge risk. luckily it got approved, but I think it also saved a lot of people a lot of time now that the vaccine is handy. So that is just my submission, sir.
So regarding the genomic consortium, which I think the government of India has created with all the ministries together, DBT, ICMR and CSIR together, which has the consortium of all the institutes, looks at these elements, what you just described, Sachin, to look at, the mutation coming up, how we can look at it and what changes it needs into the further research and development, of course, into vaccine and diagnostics and therapeutics. This is aggressively looked into by the various departments within the system.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So let me bring into now the final round. I think we have taken more time than I thought, but I think the discussion is so interesting. So before I invite questions from everyone, so I would just maybe take one final round, maybe 1 or 2 line of comments from each one of you. So this is not the last pandemic. The pandemics are going to repeat, and we are definitely wiser now. So if I were to ask you, if you were to relive this last 1 year, what we could have done better? So I'm sure you all have reflections and strong opinions. So starting with Mr. Nath, I see a smile on your face, so I'm sure you have an answer to that. So what do you think, what could we do better if we were to face such a pandemic again?
Well, first and foremost, we need to be having our own robust medical device manufacturing industry. We can't be overly import dependent. We're not a small country where we have to import things from larger countries. So to have 70 to 80% import dependence on a simple thing like masks is a big no-no for me. And now we moved from a position of import dependence to having a glut and overproduction in many of these product lines. So that's been the roller coaster ride for the country, that from extreme shortages, we've got to a position that there's been an overcapacity of production for many of these COVID-related medical devices, which of course brings an opportunity for exports, as long as the exporters are having the requisite quality certification and the regulatory approvals to export to the various countries all over the world. In terms of vaccine delivery, what I would say is that in terms of vaccine delivery, the innovations going forward would be coming forward quite differently. So there definitely has been a risk. For example, like I mentioned to you, the risk of making the capacity increase for my company alone to 1.2 billion pieces in a 6-month period. Next year, if COVID is not there, what do we do with this huge capacity? Because the world is using standard disposable syringes and the standard sizes of syringes, not 0.3 ml or 0.5 ml for giving shots. So what do you do with this huge investment that becomes? So in essence, you have a negative cash flow. People keep on telling me you're going to make a lot of money, it's going to be rosy for you. I said, no, this is a very risky year for companies like us. We have to step forward because the world is looking on us, India and the world, and we can't shy from our responsibilities. And going forward, we are working on other technologies, and that'll be the challenge again for us, because like Cadila and Serum are working on nasal delivery technologies. Now, nasal delivery, will it be coming like a droplet or a dropper based or based on a syringe? Now, usually they're working with a syringe with an adapter mechanism to atomize the mist into the nostrils. And then you've got polio drops. So other vaccine deliveries also coming with oral delivery, droppers being used, like for polio. Then you don't require a syringe. So what do you do with the surplus capacity in that case? Because then you've got droppers to take over. And then going forward, you've got other technologies which HMD also is going to be working upon, is where the product is going to be packed in plastic ampoules, not in glass vials or glass ampoules. And from plastic ampoules, with the help of specialized needles which will be producing, they'll be directly injected into the body. So you eliminate a syringe. You'll not be having a syringe anymore. So we will have to move from making syringes to becoming a subcontractor to the pharma companies and a drug delivery producer, where we will be packing the product for them into plastic ampoules with specialized needles, which will give a leak-free injection into the body. And that will allow even the advantages of rapid scale-up. So you can produce more than 20,000 pieces on a line per hour. So that becomes an advantage over there for rapid scale up for a pandemic like this. A facility like this already is coming up in USA based on this technology. So definitely when the next round of pandemic does come up, and we hope not, I think by these experiences, we'll be better prepared to face that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing this futuristic views. Dr. Arjun, what is your point of view? What could we have done better, or what could we do better?
Certainly, Sachin, a very, very relevant question. And I'll agree with Rajiv sir as well. It's been a very difficult time. And I'm sure none of us want to relive it. And I do hope and pray that no generation or civilization has to go through such a pandemic again. But like what I was saying earlier, that there have been immense learnings. And till the time humanity and mankind keeps interfering with the environment and the micro ecosystems, these kind of pandemics are bound to happen. Now, earlier you had also mentioned about testing being done at airports. And on that same point, I would like to bring up the development of more point of care tests. Now, in a country like India, where a majority of the population is in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, with a significant shortage of manpower, infrastructure, even basic things like electricity, point of care testing again is definitely the need of the hour. Again, instruments and modules such as the ones developed by Cepheid, Biomuro, Abbott now has come up with something related to PCR testing that delivers the same test within a few minutes, is obviously very important, because in tier 2, tier 3 cities, we don't have enough qualified manpower. And these are just tabletop devices giving very accurate and precise results. Definitely preparing for the next pandemic is very important with technology at the forefront. Advancement in technologies like what you were saying, Sachin, artificial intelligence also, and also at an affordable cost, because obviously looking at the density of India and also the paying power of the general population, affordability is very important. And also I would see collaboration across geographies. That means collaboration between different scientists in different countries and different parts of the world can definitely help us accelerate the development of such vaccines. Again, the preparation requires a lot of willpower, a lot of revision of whatever we have learned in the past year. And I'm sure we'll be definitely up to the task if it happens again.
Thank you, Dr. Arjun. I think it requires a separate discussion altogether about future of diagnostics. And I think Dr. Shirshendu also mentioned that, diagnostics as a topic is very important. And I think it's very, very important for a population like India, and we also had this private discussion about, the source of infection, where, now airports, I think the whole airline industry probably is going to transform if they want to better prepare for a pandemic, because most of the countries, the infection actually came through the air route, right? So how we are, from a security perspective, physically checking travelers to now biologically checking travelers. The Helsinki airport employs certain sniffer dogs who can sniff COVID out of travelers, and they are as good as RT-PCR test, right? So I think a lot of airports have done innovation there. So I don't know if Dr. Dang's lab would be, employing dogs in future, right? But it may be very interesting to see that, right? So now over to you, Mr. Frans. I see you are also smiling. So what's your futuristic point of view here? What could we do better?
Now, I think in hindsight, you can always identify a couple of things that should have been done better. But I think that the response to the pandemic, there was so much improvisation, and there was no other possibility. And I think I agree with the other panelists. we should take the opportunity, use the opportunity to learn from it and be better prepared for future pandemics. So I think that for the future, sharing information faster is critically important, because there have been significant delays in actually sharing information globally, especially at the onset of the epidemic. But also, if you look at the British mutation, now there was knowledge available already in November last year, but it took a couple of weeks or a couple of months before that information was actually shared. So, and it's understandably so, because people want to have a better understanding of the mutation, et cetera. But sharing that kind of information is critically important. Europe has to do a lot of rethinking on public health and pandemics, because the responses in Europe, and the example that you gave about Italy, shouldn't we have had an Italian translation of lockdown, is exemplary of what happened in Europe. Europe did not act as Europe. Europe acted as 27 different member states, plus the UK. And the responses across Europe have been tremendously different and contradictory to each other. And within the European framework, healthcare or health is the prerogative of the member states, not of the European Union. I think that that's going to change, and that the first step is going to be that Europe will take, the European Union and the European Commission will take the lead on pandemics, and make sure that policies across Europe are consistent and coherent. There always needs to be room and space for countries and regions to implement specific regulations and interventions for that population. But we need to get a more consistent and coherent approach to the pandemic. And the example that you gave about KLM, the Dutch government suddenly decided that everybody needs to have a rapid test result 4 hours before a flight leaves. No, it's impossible for most of the world. A couple of airports can implement that policy rapidly, but on a global basis, it's impossible. So, and I think it's just one example of interventions that have not been thought well, that haven't been thought through well, good enough. So. Global collaboration is key, and I think that the WHO and Gavi and CEPI joining forces and have that kind of global perspective is an important step in the right direction. I just want to add one more thing, and that is currently, or two more things. Currently, there's about 250 vaccine candidates under investigation. None of these 250 vaccine candidates, just a few of them will make it to the market. But I think we should make an investment in identifying the innovation component in those 250 vaccine candidates, whether it's in terms of the delivery system, whether it's in terms of the platforms, so that we actually use the relevant information that comes out of these trials and these studies. And the last thing that I would like to contribute is The genomics field has changed and is changing the face of healthcare and the future of healthcare. We now have the opportunity and the possibilities, from the biomedical sciences and from the computer sciences to decode the immunome, the human immunome. And I would be thrilled and absolutely enthusiastic if the Human Vaccines Project can work together with the Indian academic institution, with the Indian government, to join the Human Immunomics Initiative, because I think that's going to be the next revolution in public health and healthcare.
Thank you, Mr. Frans, for that. I think quite insightful. So now, Dr. Shirshendu, again, what is your futuristic point of view here? I think we are all trying to feed in some ideas to your side. And if you can, help us guide in future, maybe some of them can be realized.
Sachin, I think Rajiv, Arjun, and Dr. Frans has almost covered everything which I wanted to say. But the one thing I will echo Arjun's views here, that we should not face this type of situation anymore in our lifetimes, at least. We are 1 year behind our 1 year lost on in our lives, and it has been really struggle, painful, whatever you say, not for us, but the entire human community per se, so it has been a challenge. So we pray to God, to Almighty, that this doesn't happen. But I think this has taught us lot of things. And when it started, we started with a knee-jerk reaction. This is my personal opinion. We started with the what to do, how to start, where to start. These were questions, and not only in our minds, but everybody's minds, what to do, how to do. But this taught us to be collaborative. In my funding, grant writing workshops and grant clinics, I use the word, where 360 degree funding proposals. So I think this taught us how we need to be a 360 degree team to take innovations from the bench to the bedside. And that we have done, in the last 10, 12 months. Easily 10 months or 11 months, we have done that. So I think we worked together. The basic researchers worked with the clinicians worked with the vaccine makers worked with the syringe team like Rajiv, the medical technology device companies, the diagnostic companies, so all worked together in collaboration to deliver solutions which can be used, integrated, and brought out for in an affordable, accessible manner. So I think the biggest learning is to work collaboration, which we really had to put in place. And I think future also leads the way that we should really work collaboratively to take our innovations to the next level. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so I again thankful to all of you. The time that I promised by which we conclude, I think we have already exceeded that by 15 minutes. I hope I have not prevented you from attending to any important agenda. But in case if there is any question from any of the participants, feel free to, raise your hand and maybe, make a comment. Otherwise, I can already thank and conclude the, our eminent panelists for today. And I don't know if maybe some of you are already aware, we have a magazine where some of you have already contributed with your, thoughts. Mr. Nath has written, and Dr. Mukherjee has written. But I also invite Dr. Arjun and Mr. Frans, if you want to author an article, they're more than happy to, publish your thoughts. I think Dr. Amit has raised his hand. Dr. Amit, would you like to unmute yourself and say?
Yeah. Thank you, Sachin, for such a beautiful session on COVID vaccine. I thought maybe this point also should add value to our discussion. Is there's a lot of innovation in this vaccine development and planning and delivery, and this COVID has really taught us about how to be how to be vigilant. I was emphasizing a point where uh, more than 70% of our population is in the rural community. So I feel a challenge is to address to this 70% of our population with immense, amazing, robust plan of action on resource planning of healthcare workers in preparedness towards this, because only the major metro cities were fortunate enough to get the healthcare delivery for this COVID patients easily accessible. But tier 2, tier 3 cities, we faced a lot of challenges in addressing the population, the educating the manpower, healthcare workers, and then there's an array of challenges which we felt. But the way forward, we should be prepared so that our resource planning for healthcare workers in terms of education, in terms of educating the rural population, the development of primary healthcare with these kind of advancement in medtech, and as well as diagnostics, should also be carried out on a pyramid level to the bottom line of our ecosystem. So as a healthcare provider, I was handling both the COVID hospital and as well as the cardiac setup, where we face the major challenge of how to, bring in the healthcare workers together in a right frame, educating them, and then, keeping these diagnostics tools easily accessible and easily we've been able to, deliver these to our patients. So I feel this also should be in our agenda in future for our preparedness towards any kind of this kind of a pandemic situation anytime which is arising.
Thank you, Dr. Amit. I think there is India and there is Bharat, and sometimes the story of Bharat remains untold. So, Mr. Frans, Bharat is the Hindi word for India, and I think Dr. Amit comes from Rajkot, which is a city in Gujarat, and he's running a COVID hospital there. So I think he speaks from his experience. So sometimes, we are only listening to, let's say, a point of view which is very much urban India. So thank you for sharing, Dr. Amit, your point of view. So if there are no further comments or questions, I would like to thank all of you for your active participation. And I really enjoyed this discussion, and I look forward for future contributions from you, Mr. Nath, Mr. Frans, Dr. Dang, Dr. Mukherjee. And thanks again very much for sharing your valuable time with us, creating this conversation. Thank you very much.